The pressure surrounding Erika Kirk is growing rapidly, and online speculation about her possible motives has now exploded into an entirely different conversation. According to critics following the case closely, they believe the issue was never really about justice or uncovering the complete truth behind what happened. Instead, many now argue that the situation has become wrapped up in publicity, image management, and controlling the public narrative before all the evidence is fully examined. What especially confused observers was hearing prosecutors in a first-degree murder proceeding repeatedly use a word as soft and strange as mischief. For most people, that word sounds harmless, something associated with childhood troublemaking, minor pranks, or playful behavior. It feels wildly out of place when attached to a case involving death penalty discussions, massive investigations, and allegations this serious. Yet Deputy Utah County Attorney Ryan McBride reportedly used that exact language while arguing that these proceedings needed maximum visibility and public attention. The contrast between the seriousness of the accusations and the oddly casual wording immediately raised eyebrows among people following every development. At the same time, the state reportedly handed over an enormous mountain of discovery material to the defense team, including thousands of files, huge quantities of digital evidence, extensive video footage, DNA records, and complicated ballistic reports that allegedly contain inconsistencies and unanswered questions. The defense argued that the amount of information was so overwhelming that a proper review could not realistically happen in only a short period of time. Attorneys estimated they would require months just to begin carefully sorting through the evidence, and potentially hundreds of hours more to fully analyze everything presented to them. Critics now claim the timing of the release is one of the most suspicious parts of the entire situation because much of the material was reportedly delivered extremely late in the process. That has fueled accusations that the defense is being forced into a race against the clock while prosecutors continue aggressively pushing the case into the public spotlight. According to those criticizing the prosecution's strategy, the concern is no longer just about the courtroom itself. They believe the real battle is taking place in public opinion, on television, online discussions, and social media narratives. While investigators still hold massive amounts of raw data and unresolved forensic questions remain under debate, opponents argue that the state appears determined to move forward quickly before deeper scrutiny can happen. The speed of the process has become a major talking point, especially after Erika Kirk reportedly requested a victim representative's right to a speedy trial. That decision immediately triggered even more speculation online, with critics questioning why there appears to be such urgency when the evidence itself has not yet been fully reviewed by the defense. Some commentators argue there should be more patience and transparency before pushing the proceedings further into a highly publicized media spectacle. As debate intensified, online personalities and independent commentators started connecting what they describe as inconsistencies in the ballistic evidence with broader political and media interests surrounding the case. Some believe the narrative being presented publicly was carefully designed long before every forensic detail had been independently challenged. Others argue the emotional presentation of the case has become just as important as the actual evidence itself. The prosecution's version of events paints a dramatic and cinematic picture, a suspect allegedly arriving on campus in a Dodge Charger, scouting locations while dressed casually in a holey hat and maroon shirt, then later returning in disguise before carrying out the attack from a rooftop position. Investigators reportedly claimed they recovered a weapon wrapped in a towel along with strange inscriptions connected to the suspect. Supporters of the prosecution say these details form a compelling timeline, while critics counter that dramatic storytelling should never replace a careful examination of the hard evidence. Meanwhile, independent media figures covering the case continue building enormous audiences around every new development, fueling constant online discussion and political commentary. The situation has evolved far beyond a standard criminal investigation and now sits at the center of internet culture, partisan arguments, conspiracy theories, and nonstop media analysis. Every hearing, filing, and statement immediately becomes content for debate across podcasts, live streams, and social platforms. Because of that, many observers now believe the case is being fought on two separate fronts at the same time, one inside the courtroom and another inside the court of public opinion, where perception often moves faster than facts. What's unfolding now feels less like a straightforward legal process and more like a carefully staged public spectacle, where timing, headlines, and perception seem almost as important as the actual evidence itself. Beneath all the dramatic courtroom language and non-stop media attention, critics believe something buried deep inside the paperwork may become far more important than the emotional narrative being pushed in public. The defense team is reportedly buried under an avalanche of digital discovery material that arrived at the last possible moment. Terabytes of information containing thousands upon thousands of documents, surveillance files, forensic reports, and countless hours of video footage. Legal analysts following the case argue that this kind of late evidence dump creates chaos intentionally because no defense team can realistically absorb and challenge every detail under extreme time pressure. According to skeptics, forcing the trial forward while attorneys are still sorting through mountains of digital material increases the chances that inconsistencies, weak points, or contradictions hidden inside the evidence may never receive proper attention. At the same time, public discussion surrounding the prosecution strategy has become even more intense because of the state's handling of the DNA evidence. Prosecutors reportedly described the DNA findings using extraordinarily strong language and astronomical statistical claims, portraying the science as overwhelmingly conclusive. Yet critics immediately noticed something strange. Questions surrounding the ballistic evidence have only added more fuel to the controversy. Reports circulating online claim that ballistic findings connected to the recovered weapon may not align as cleanly with the prosecution's narrative as initially suggested. Independent commentators have focused heavily on reports indicating that certain forensic comparisons allegedly failed to produce a definitive match. Whether those claims ultimately hold up in court remains uncertain, but the existence of those discussions alone has intensified scrutiny surrounding the entire investigation. Opponents of the prosecution argue that pursuing the death penalty while major forensic disputes remain unresolved is deeply troubling, especially when defense attorneys are still waiting for access to additional underlying data and analysis. Another major source of frustration involves the role of federal agencies and the handling of raw forensic material. According to reports discussed widely online, federal investigators are allegedly still holding portions of the underlying analytical data connected to the case. Critics argue that without complete access to the raw evidence, the defense cannot independently verify conclusions presented by prosecutors. That has fueled accusations that key information is being delayed while public pressure for conviction continues growing louder. Supporters of the defense believe this creates an uneven playing field where dramatic press narratives move quickly, while the slower process of scientific review remains incomplete behind the scenes. Meanwhile, media coverage and online commentary continue transforming the case into something much larger than a normal criminal proceeding. Every new filing, leak, and courtroom update instantly becomes content for political influencers, live stream discussions, podcasts, and social media debates. Supporters of the prosecution describe the case as overwhelming and straightforward, while critics insist the rush toward judgment feels premature considering the unresolved questions surrounding ballistics, DNA interpretation, and delayed evidence disclosures. The divide between those two narratives grows wider every day, turning the case into a battle not only over facts, but also over trust, perception, and control of the public story before the full legal process has even finished unfolding. At this stage, critics of the prosecution are asking a very simple question. If the state truly possesses overwhelming evidence, then why not fully release everything to the defense immediately and allow every forensic claim to be independently challenged without delay? That question has become central to the growing controversy surrounding the case. For many observers, the issue stopped being just about the allegations themselves and became about the process, specifically whether the legal system is prioritizing transparency and fairness or prioritizing speed, optics, and public pressure. The concern intensified after Deputy Utah County Attorney Ryan McBride publicly argued for expanded camera access in the courtroom while using the phrase, "Mischief lurks in the dark." That line immediately spread online because people found it bizarrely theatrical for a first-degree murder case involving the possibility of the death penalty. To critics, it sounded less like the language of a careful legal proceeding and more like the setup for a televised production designed to influence public emotion before all the evidence is fully examined. Opponents of the prosecution now argue that the repeated calls for bright lights and maximum media exposure reveal something much deeper about how the case is being handled. They believe the courtroom itself is becoming part of a larger performance where cameras, emotional testimony, and dramatic visuals matter just as much as the actual forensic evidence. According to that perspective, the prosecution spent months constructing a compelling public narrative and now fears that a slower, more methodical review of the data could weaken that storyline. Critics point specifically to unresolved disputes surrounding DNA analysis and ballistics evidence, arguing that these complicated scientific questions are being overshadowed by emotionally charged media coverage. In their view, the real danger to the prosecution is not mischief in the dark, but rather the possibility that extended scrutiny could expose flaws, inconsistencies, or unanswered questions hidden within the evidence itself. The debate surrounding Erika Kirk has become deeply intertwined with those concerns. Critics claim she has emerged as one of the loudest voices pushing for greater media attention because public visibility strengthens the broader narrative surrounding the case. Online commentators increasingly portray her not simply as a grieving figure connected to the story, but as someone attempting to position herself as a major public personality and influential leader within conservative political circles. Supporters reject those accusations as unfair and politically motivated, but detractors argue that the media attention itself has become strategically valuable. According to that interpretation, cameras are no longer just documenting the proceedings. They are helping shape reputations, reinforce political branding, and build emotional momentum around a specific version of events before the trial has even concluded. Meanwhile, independent commentators claim the same audience that once passionately supported Erika and Charlie is now being mobilized to pressure the public into demanding a highly emotional trial by media. Critics argue that many people online are no longer interested in patiently waiting for every piece of evidence to be tested in court. Instead, they believe large portions of the audience already see the story in simple terms: heroes, villains, victims, and monsters. That environment, according to skeptics, creates enormous pressure for prosecutors to deliver a dramatic public conclusion quickly, regardless of whether every forensic detail has been fully explored. They argue that unresolved issues surrounding ballistic comparisons,